All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. It's going to be um, in the category of lean. It's an introduction to 5S. I'm Mike Howell with ESA Tech Support. I'm going to be presenting the webinar today. Um, with this Zoom tool we use, if you have any questions, if you're using the plugin, you'll see a raise hand icon. You can click that and wait to be called on. You can also submit written questions through the Q&A link there. Using the web browser, there's also a raise hand button, and then by using the join audio by computer link, you'll have the option of asking your question verbally as well. So just to start out with a little history of lean and where that's come from and how we got where we are. Back in the early 1900s, Henry Ford's credited with the first production line with interchangeable parts, first moving assembly line, incorporating things like conveyors, QC checks, go-no-go gauges, and standardized work. Not a lot of variety here, though. If you wanted a black car, you got black. If you wanted a red car, you still got black. So very little variety offered in that production environment. But it kind of kick-started this flow production. And then in the 1940s, and then early 40s, and then in post-war times, Toyota began the Toyota production system. One of the most key individuals in that development was Teiichi Ohno. And what we now call lean is derived predominantly from the Toyota production system. So this work, although it began in manufacturing, it certainly extended far beyond into other work environments, including service as well, and healthcare. Been really big in healthcare. In the 90s, with a lot of push towards improved quality, lean was really making a move, especially with large manufacturers and especially with automotive manufacturers in the U.S. Jim Womack, who was with Lean Enterprise Institute, published a book called The Machine That Changed the World back in 1991. And it describes lean thoroughly, goes through most of the processes, again, back through the TPS and the founding of that. As I mentioned before, now lean is spread into all sorts of sectors. The tool we're going to look at today, 5S, is just one tool that's used by organizations that operate under what we would consider lean principles. Womack once said that the main purpose of 5S is just to make good work possible and sustainable for any organization. So no matter what you do, you just want to be able to do a good job at it. So that's providing resources and training and skills and for the workforce, a clean environment in which to work, making it possible for them to do work and then sustaining that achievement once you get there. So we're going to start now with just an overview of 5S. Some of the benefits of using this process for workplace organization are that any organization is going to be more effective when their work areas are organized. So easier to get around in, to see what's going on. Visual management becomes a possibility. Next, the appearance and organization of the service center reflects on the product delivered. Most studies that have been performed around this show that higher quality throughput is accomplished when it's produced in a clean and organized environment. And that's the same whether we're working in a plant or sitting at our desk. If we're working in an organized environment at your desk, it's easier to get things done and know where things are and work efficiently and effectively. Last, 5S eliminates wasted time. It reduces stress and frustration when you're trying to locate items or work in a cluttered space. It also improves safety because of those same reasons. Now, when this process was first started, these 5S terms being Japanese, the process starts up here. This is Seiri, Seiton, Seiso, Seiketsu, and Shitsuka. Didn't take long to figure out that not many people here speak Japanese fluently. So when you take these terms and you put them into English, still trying to stay with that 5S, so picking words that kind of fit in, that begin with S and translate fairly well. You get sort, straighten, shine, standardize, and sustain. And those are the 5 elements. So we're going to go through each one of those elements one by one now. The sort phase, the very first thing here, what we're doing is eliminating all the unnecessary items around us in our workspace. That includes tools, parts, inventory, work instructions, anything that we don't need to be able to do our tasks. We want to get it out of our space so that space can be used for value-added activities and so that it doesn't add to clutter. So we're going to go through all the tools, materials, and everything in the plant and work areas and sort those. The things we want to keep are the things that are essential to doing our job, and then we want to eliminate everything else. The things that are quote unquote eliminated are either going to be stored or discarded depending on their value to the organization. The next phase is the straighten phase. So now that we know what items we want to keep, we're going to find every item a permanent home, a location where it's going to be kept and maintained. We're going to organize those items according to usage, with the things we use most frequently are going to be closest to us and easiest to get. They're also going to be in places where they're used, so workstations where they're used. We're also going to make items easy to get to, and that includes not only our tools and parts and materials, but hard copy files, electronic files. So if we're thinking of applying this, in our administrative areas or filing areas, we want, everything indexed appropriately in some fashion by job number or manufacturer or horsepower, whatever we use to retrieve information. And the same thing goes with electronic files. So not just the physical things we see in front of us. Proper straightening is almost always going to require some layout changes, because when you start going through this and what makes sense to you, you're going to find some things that you might want to move around to make it easier to follow your processes. And again, this goes out into the shop floor and also into the offices as well. So once we know the things we want to keep and we know where we want to keep them, we go into the shine phase. And this is all about keeping your workspace, your equipment clean, tidy, organized, and maintained. So, this is some basic things we're going to do at the end of each shift. Once we get it clean the first time, make sure everything's restored to its rightful location. This makes things like spills and leaks very easy to see when you're in an uncluttered space. And then those become, really good signs that you need to do some maintenance on a piece of equipment, for example. If there's an oil leak on the floor, something like that. You have to really mesh this work into your daily processes. So when you repair a motor, you assemble it and move it out of the assembly area over for final test, part of that assembly process should end up with, cleaning up that work area where the assembly took place, putting away tools, etc. It's part of the activity, not a different activity or additional activity you got to do. And that kind of leads us into the standardizing process. So we do best work as an organization when we use standardized work practices. So we do things consistently, locations locked in. The work areas for particular job functions should be identical and easy to see what's missing. So if you have, depending on the size of your service center, if you have 2 work bays where you're doing assembly of NEMA frame motors, those should really look identical. Same kind of tools there, same organization, so that if one mechanic moves over into the next work area, he should be able to pick up and just do what he needs to do and find all the tools that are needed. And likewise, if you're a organization that has multiple service centers, you really should be able to have someone float from shop to shop and really be able to walk in and do the job. Granted, there's going to be some layout differences, but for the basic tasks, should be able to standardize on the work, the tools that are needed, and how those are made available to employees. One thing that's key here when you start a process like this is that everyone needs to know the first 3 S before you can expect them to work in the standardized environment. So this is not something where whoever's responsible for the safety program or the QA program or a supervisor gets the whole burden. It's got to be a complete buy-in and really implemented thoroughly throughout the organization. To be successful requires everyone. Once you're standardized in your process, then you want to move into the sustain phase. And this is usually where most people fall apart when they start trying to do lean activities, because 5S gets kind of looked at as a starting point a lot of times when people are considering lean, not only because it makes sense to get organized, but also because it's something that people think is a little easier to understand and start with than if you looked at value mapping or something like that. So they go through this process of the first 4 S's and they get to the sustain phase, and it kind of loses steam. The process loses steam, and then 2 months later, the shop's a mess. Things are gone from where they should have been. New employees have come in and haven't been trained on the process. So it's those kind of things. So it really requires a cultural shift, which means whoever calls the shots, whether it's the owner or a shop manager, that person or that entity really has to buy in order to have this process work. So in sustaining, we want to maintain our standards and review them periodically, because I mentioned Toyota. If you go to a Toyota plant, they're going to tell you, come on in and look at what we're doing. They don't care if you're a competitor, because by the time you go implement what they were doing, they're going to be doing something better next time. They continually review their processes and improve them. So you want to establish standards, you want to follow standards, but you also want to improve them and review them periodically to make sure that you're doing what's best for your organization. Once you get these previous steps, the first 4 established, those are the new way to operate. And that's for everyone in the organization. No favoritism there. Just that's the way that the business operates when you come in the door until you go home. You want to be, especially at a management level, very open for suggested improvements. Most often, the folks doing a particular task have the knowledge necessary to improve that process. They're hands-in. They're experts in their particular fields, and that's where you get a lot of your good improvement information. So you want to be on target and really trying to pull those suggestions from those folks. And then once new ways of working or improvements are suggested and they are going to be implemented, don't jump the gun. Go back through the first 4S and you make changes to your standard processes as needed, so that you're not sidestepping the way you are running an organization. You're just modifying. So that's the first 5S overview portion. And now we're going to jump into an exercise. These are often much easier to do in person rather than in a webinar environment, but we're going to give it a shot. The slide packs that were sent out to everyone had a second set of game slides, and for any sites, remote sites that are choosing to participate in the game, you may have picked one or more individuals that's going to kind of be the participant in the game. What we're going to do is called the numbers game, and it's really just a way to demonstrate the effectiveness of this process. And though the numbers game is simple, so are a lot of the things we do in our organizations. And you really do see, this type of improvement when you implement a process like 5S. So we're going to go through a phase for sort, a phase for straighten. We're kind of going to pretend we did a shine. We're going to go through another phase for standardizing, and then one for sustaining and showing the importance of maintaining. All right, so again, if you're participating in this, we have one or more people from your site, and whoever your facilitator there is has some pages, one for each phase of the game. And it's your option. You can feel free to chat back some of your results if you choose. I've seen this exercise done, probably a couple of dozen times, and the results are very similar each time. So we're going to start with phase A. And the way this is going to work, you guys can go ahead and give the phase A sheet face down to the individual. But what we're going to do is simulate a work shift. It's going to only be 20 seconds of our webinar for each phase. And the task for the individual is going to be to have a pen or pencil, and you're going to turn the page over, and you're going to strike out numbers from 1 to 49 in the correct sequence. So you have to find the number 1 and mark it out, and then 2, mark it out, then 3, and so forth and so on. And you want to get as many as you can from 1 to 49. So you can go ahead and turn that sheet over now and start. All right, so that's the end of the A phase, 20 seconds. So each of you can, I'll give you just a few seconds, even if you're not sending that information back, but you can just kind of, whoever's doing it, yell out to your colleagues how many you got. Typically it's a few, sometimes as few as 0, sometimes half a dozen or so. But this work area represented a typical workplace, not using something like 5S, where you have a lot of items. Those could be tools, they could be inventory parts, and they're kind of cluttered and not organized. So we're going to move into phase B now. And in phase B, we're going to start implementation of 5S, and we know the first phase of that is to sort. So we're only interested in the numbers from 1 to 49. Those are the numbers we know we need for our process. So we're going to remove in the second phase here all of the numbers from 50 to 90 that were originally on the sheet, because we don't need them at all. So we've identified what we want to need and keep and what we want to discard. So now the person should have the phase B sheet face down. Same rule applies. You're going to start out with number 1 and try to go to 49 in sequence during a 20-second shift. You can start now. Okay, we'll stop phase B. And as you can see, just by looking at the workspace now, it's still disorganized, but it's far less cluttered than it was when we had all the things we didn't need in there following the sort phase. So it's better. Most times people will get, maybe twice as many numbers that they did during that first round. So now we're going to move into phase C. We're going to do some straightening. And the way we're going to do this is install some racks, and we're going to organize our parts or numbers so that in a sequence that's logical. And we're going to start in the bottom left-hand corner with number 1, and then we're going to put number 2 in the next, number 3 in the next, and 4, so that the numbers are located from left to right and top to bottom. We're going to give phase C sheet now to the participant, and the same rules are going to apply. 20 seconds. Here's the look of our work area now, so you can go ahead and begin. Okay, now follow up now to our last process. It made things a lot easier having those in the rack in some order, but there was still some cluttering. And we're going to do now is look at the process itself and standardize. Since we're dealing with numbers that go from 1 to 49 in sequence, it makes a lot of sense to reorganize them in a standard fashion that'll simplify our task for us. So we're going to pretend that in this standardized phase, that's what we've done. You can give that phase D sheet face down to the participant. The same rules are going to apply. So again, you're going to strike out the numbers from 1 to 49 from in that order. So here's the look of our workspace now, and you can begin. It's only with a few exceptions typically that participants, by the time you get to this phase, don't have all 49 numbers marked out. So this is a much different appearance than what we had in that first phase. And because especially in our type of industry where we're very service oriented and we're working around the clock and we have customers down, we sometimes during busy times tend to end up with a lot of clutter. So maintaining this type of implementation is really beneficial, not only for getting the work done on time and safely, but for improvements to the bottom line as well. So phase E of this is we're going to reinforce the sustaining portion. We can return back to our original work area, and in this instance we can pretend that these are parts or they're tools, but in any case we have a job that we need to get done. So let's say these are materials, and we know we're supposed to have some in stock. We need 2 parts in order to get this repair done. It's a rush overtime, and we're back to the look of our original work area. And so the person comes out, they get their pick list or bill of materials, and they know these 2 parts they need to find, and here's where they have to find them. So during the next 20 seconds, again, numbers from 1 to 49, 2 of those numbers are missing. So let's see who can find one or both of those numbers. I've never seen anybody find them. I mean, it's kind of obvious one that would be difficult. But if we go back to our standardized layout after we had implemented 5S, and we go in, we can clearly see what's missing. It's obvious that 18 and 42 aren't there. And that's the kind of benefit we have from a visual workplace that has gone through a good 5S implementation. So we're going to look at a few examples now and kind of an action plan on how you do this. I'll tell you, it's not a difficult thing to do, and it just takes rolling up your sleeves and dedicating some time to improve it. Before you start, you always want to take a couple of pictures of your workspace, just so you have a good record of where you started and where you ended. Kind of like we do when we receive a motor into the shop and we take before and after pictures. An example above was one of our members' machine shop areas. You can do things like putting your photos in a PowerPoint to show management. You can create a scrapbook, leaving the break room to show progress for the team working on this particular action. But you want to keep good records of the work you're doing, and you want to make sure definitely to reward teams for good work in the implementation of this. So again, first stage is going to be sorting. You want to look for necessary and unnecessary items. You want to remove things if you didn't remember you had it. I've got stuff like that. If you don't know what it is, if it's covered in dust because it hasn't been touched in 5 years, if it's something you don't use, more than once per month, some criteria that you set up within your own organization, what makes sense to you, but those types of things shouldn't be right in front of you when you're trying to do your work. If there's doubt, throw it out. And that doesn't mean that if you come across an item and you don't know what it is, you should chunk it in the dumpster. So we're going to go through a process with sorting so that we don't do anything financially detrimental to the organization. We don't want to throw out good items, etc. But you do want to get rid of what you don't need. The good practice is a rule of 1. If you have a tool on a shadow board or in a tray, and you never use more than one of those tools at a time, you shouldn't have 3 of them in the box typically. Doesn't mean it's not okay to have a tool storage area somewhere, in the shelving area, something where you can get to spare items, but they shouldn't clutter your area if you only use one at a time. Also, hoarding of materials is a waste of money, excessive inventory. if you have 6 winders and they all have 5 rolls of mica tape in their toolbox, instead of having a certain quantity of mica tape on the shelf for storing materials in the winding area, then you end up with a lot more things than you need. Same thing goes with tools like calipers or micrometers. You shouldn't have more of those sitting around than you need, especially when you're paying for things like calibration. So it's a lot cheaper to calibrate 2 micrometers than it is to calibrate 10 micrometers. So if those 2 are in an area where you can easily get to them, then you don't need them in every toolbox around the service center. So again, develop your criteria for what's necessary, review those. If it doesn't meet your criteria, then it's gone. The way we can sort these is by using a tag system. Now, this is done differently by different organizations, but sometimes red tags are the only ones used, and it's actually called red tagging. A lot of people call that this process, but other folks will tag everything in an area just so they know it's been looked at, with the idea that red tags are going to get removed. Yellow tags, not sure, need to come back to it, or maybe someone else needs to make that decision that's not there at the time. And then green tags are something we definitely need in the area. So something that's used on occasion, but not every day, you can have a designated central type location for storing that item. Depending on how much winding a shop does, that might be a surge tester or a Quorloss tester, just depends. Things that are not used but have value for the area, you're going to store those in the red tag area. That means other people that are 5S'ing their areas might be able to use those items in their work area if they're needed. But you got to manage this red tag area. Other items are going to end up identified as either not going to be used or no value at all to the company. And for those, someone at whatever level you guys decide needs to make the decision on sell it or scrap it out. When you have items that are hard to decide or whether or not you're going to save it or dispose of it, this sorting process does help. So you can, have these areas to collect them, use a log or a worksheet. And the difficult decisions can be moved up the chain to the right person to find out what you really want to keep. So here's an area that could be, this is a red tag type storage area of items that are going to have to be gone through and either discarded, grabbed by another department, sold, scrapped, etc., but removed from the workstation where they were. And you want to continue to take pictures of your progress during this time, and as you sort the unnecessary items and keep your project records updated. Once you're finished with the sorting and you go into the straighten, one of the most probably overused phrases, a place for everything and an everything in its place. My kids like the movie Big Hero 6. If you've ever watched it, there's a fictitious city called San Fran, Tokyo, and when they go into the robotics lab, one of the guys is just over clear on how much he wants his tools sorted, and he uses that exact phrase. So they really brought some of that lean into the movie. When you are designing storage for unnecessary items, you want to keep a couple of things in mind. You want to simplify your storage areas for access and use. You want to have one of each item, that's best. If you don't need duplicates, that goes again for tools and supplies. And you want to use the 30-second storage and retrieval rule. So if it's a tool you use once or twice a week, you don't want to store it in the bottom of a container behind another container that you need the forklift to move to get to it. You want to be able to go get that tool in 30 seconds or less to be able to use it. And this is, a pretty simple concept, but it's sometimes not that easy for organizations to put into practice. Just remember to organize your storage according to your frequency of use. Things you use most often, keep those closest to you. Everything, accessible within 30 seconds. And if you have to walk outside of your work area to get an item that you use regularly, you find yourself, having to walk across the shop, then the item's located too far away. And that's where we look at, layout issues with this type of process. So we're identifying, functional placements for materials, parts, carts, shelves, all of our tools, equipment. Granted, some equipment we have in the service center, if we have a $40,000 piece of test equipment, maybe we're only going to have one of those, and maybe other departments do have to use it from time to time. So there's some rare exceptions. You may have one or two that exceed that 30-second rule, but most of the time you can do it. You also want to organize and lay out your work area with borders around items, so that you can quickly visualize when they're out of place. Things like pallet jacks, garbage cans, brooms, mop carts, any of those types of things that need a place to live, you want to mark the floor around them with marking tape. You can buy kits for 5S stuff actually for that. That's easily removed, but pretty durable as well. And that, again, not only lets everyone else in the service center get to an item when they need it, but if they go to that place or look at that place and it's not there, that means someone's using it. It doesn't mean that someone left it laying in a corner and they need to search the entire service center to try and find it. So again, visual management helps you see when things aren't there. When we're storing items, we want to use this 45-degree rule. Idea here is we don't want folks hurting themselves trying to get things that they use on a regular basis. This minimizes twisting. Everything we use should be easily within reach. The strike zone rule that you see here, with the reference to baseball or softball, storing tools and supplies between shoulders and knees, that minimizes reaching and bending. It's just a lot better ergonomically to help people when they're working with these items on a daily basis. After we've straightened, again, continue to take pictures. So you can see here is implementation of a shadow board in the area for tools. You can see what types of tools are kept there. You can see which ones are not in place right now. They're color coded to the area in which they belong. They're also not taking up floor space. So something that might have been a toolbox taking up floor space is now up and out of the way, easy to get to, and easy to work with. You want to quantify your results whenever possible when you're doing these activities. When you went through and you did your first few S's, how many items did you dispose of? What kind of new storage methods did you devise? How much empty space is now available for another use, like an additional workstation or additional product line? That happens quite a bit. When companies go through this type of process, they find out they have a lot more floor space than they actually thought they did. And it really helps with then, looking at different ways of modifying layout to eliminate wasted steps and improve flow of the machines through the service center. Just some other examples here: calibration cart, storage of some different materials on a pegboard in the winding department. This is easy to move things around. Using the pegboards, you can change the configuration. Here is some hoist change storage, a workbench, storage of different trash cans. And those are even color coded depending on what's going to go in them. Makes things easy. After we've straightened, we're going to go through the shine process. So again, this is a continuous and visual and physical control of the work area. It promotes safety, order, cleanliness, and routine maintenance. Some of the things you want to ask when you're examining an area: is everything in place? Is anything missing from the work area? Is the work area clean? Any safety measures not being observed? Is it ready for use by the next person that's going to use that workstation? So it also, comes into that: leave the area like you found it, so the next person can be efficient in their work as well. What can't be overstated is that it's everybody's responsibility to maintain the work environment in a safe, clean, and orderly manner. Some different, organizations that do a really good job of this. I don't know how many of you spent time at Disney World, but it's not uncommon at all to see folks in suits that work at Disney bending over and picking up trash, moving things around, and keeping the areas clean. They really, it's a top to bottom customer satisfaction, clean work environment, etc., to drive their mission statement, and that really helps paint the picture for everyone that works there. And again, it also promotes safety, which I know some committee members are going to be producing articles for the Currents newsletter later this year that are covering some of these topics, and then how they contribute, work along with safety programs as well. But you want to do physical and mental checks daily. When you see something wrong and it's minor, fix it immediately. Just go ahead and do it. You want to even clean places most people don't notice, where dust tends to build up or trash gets thrown. Take pride in the appearance of the workplace. Again, what studies show is that when there's a very clean workplace, there's very neat work going out of that workplace. So it really is contagious in the way it gets implemented throughout organizations. And again, cleaning is a visual form of inspection. When you think about, for example, inspecting a squirrel cage rotor after disassembly and going through cleaning and looking for cracks and fans and things like that, the cleaning process itself forces you to look at things and make sure that they're in good working order. So after we have done that, it's time to standardize. The established borders we have, they need to become temporarily permanent, meaning they need to be identified in a way that is easy to see, but is not going to get destroyed by a cart rolling across it or something like that. It needs to be a permanent barrier. We use the word temporary because we're always going to look for ways to improve, in which case we may be changing those borders a month from now. And once we've finished, sort, straighten, and shine, we got to document the agreements that have been made between everyone in the organization. And when you're looking at a way to document a work instruction, you always want to ask some simple questions like who, what, where, when, and how. For any task, if you can answer those questions, you've got it documented okay. It's not going to be a 100-page book. It needs to be a one-page, easy to read for a process that you can post up in a work area, and it's just clear who's responsible and when it's done and how often, etc. There's no right way, again, to complete this. It should be something that works well for your organization. What works well for you may not be what works well at Toyota or at a particular hospital or a large, 80 truck fleet service organization. Just may be different. Some people may be all electronic, things on tablets. Others may use pinup boards. So it's just, find what works for you and what helps you be efficient, and then the process will be, effective for you. The last step here again is sustaining. So we want to be accountable. we spent time and resources to go through this process and make our workplace better organized, allow for more efficiency. It really helps us, work smarter, not harder, and follow through continually on all the first elements: sort, straighten, shine, standardize. That helps us sustain what we've accomplishments, no backsliding. So, using checklists and visual workplace concepts, things like shadow boards, borders, pictures of how a workplace should look. That's actually a really good thing, is to take a picture of a finished work area, post it. This is what it should look like when you come in the morning. This is what it should look like when you leave in the afternoon or before the next shift comes in. A lot of larger organizations have personnel that kind of do this stuff all day. So they might use these 5S audit scorecards. The same kind of tool. It doesn't have to be an independent audit. You can use it in your own workplace or your own workstation, but it gives some kind of indicator of what needs to be checked, just like we use check sheets when we go through a motor inspection. Not because we don't know the steps, but it helps us not miss anything and just know that we've touched all the areas we were supposed to. Again, this is a good process, and it's a very widely implemented process. Nothing new or gimmicky or magic about it. Really, it's a fairly straightforward thing that organizations in all areas of business have implemented, both in businesses and believe it or not, you can be really successful doing this even in a home environment. I was at a Shingo Prize conference several years ago, and if you're not familiar with that prize, it's one that is awarded to organizations that are excellent in lean implementation. Now, anybody that's doing lean out there, you should check into Shingo if you're not involved with it. It's a great process for sharing best practices. But there was a keynote speaker who had been involved in a big aerospace project for about 9 months, working 15-hour days, and he had finished his contract and was going to have a few months off. So he had worked out a deal with his wife. She was going back to work, and they had a 3-year-old daughter, and he decided that he was going to stay home with his daughter for a few months, and he was thinking about how easy that was going to be. And he said by the end of the first day lunch, the whole house was destroyed, and the daughter was running around. She was still in her pajamas, hair everywhere, lunch spilled on the floor, toys, couldn't walk across the living room. And he had sat down at the end of the day and said, I got to 5S this place. And so he started with his 3-year-old the next day on a 5S project, and they organized the pantry, how plates were stored, where they were stored, snacks for the daughter in the kitchen. The living room toy area closet was converted into a toy area with containers for all different types of toys. They were sorted. And because his daughter was only 3, she was illiterate. She couldn't read. So instead of labels with words, he used pictures and clear containers. And she could have 3 toys out at one time. And then there was a process where if you want a different toy, you have to put one back to get one out. And so he had all his statistics there, and they had improved their cleanup time from day 1 at about 2 hours down to less than 4 minutes by the end of the 5S process. So he really believed in it, and you really do get those types of accomplishments in your service center as well. We had one question come up about is the 5S audit scorecard available? So referring to the one I guess you're seeing on the screen there. And also asking about the file that was linked in the email. Yes, you can download that slide pack, and this 5S audit scorecard is one that is available just with a Google search. This is one of those forms that there's not a lot of value in ESA developing our version and putting it out on the website. There's lots of free ones out there. And this format is just one format. You'll find 20 or 30 different ones if you just Google 5S audit scorecard. You'll find PDFs that you can download. Some will be spreadsheets that you can go around with a tablet and complete as well. So there's a lot of resources out there. And if you want more in-depth information, you can also go out and look at Audible if you're into audiobooks, or go on Amazon, and if you just search 5S implementation, everyone who used to work in a successful company that's now a consultant has written a book. So there's lots of stuff out there. I would look at Lean Enterprise Institute, LEI. It's excellent. Lots of free resources there as well. So we're going to continue to ask if there's any more questions. We have just a few more minutes before completing the webinar today. All right. Okay, well, if I've answered all the questions, oh, we have a couple of more questions that have popped in. We have a minute before answering these, I suppose. First, what's the best practice to organize the workshop followed in the world? I would say that it's for organization, this is probably the most widely used process for companies that we call excellent organizations today. Companies that really perform at very high levels of quality. If you go in those places on plant tours and things like that, you'll see a lot of the things we discussed today with the visual management, shadow boards. You'll see things, storage areas clearly identified and storage locations marked on the floor, etc. So I would say this is as good as any, and also an extremely popular way of making your organization more organized. Next question is, how do you get management on board? And that's a good one, because if you want to do anything and you can't get management on board, it's difficult to undertake that process. One good thing about 5S is it doesn't cost much. It doesn't cost a whole lot in time, and it doesn't cost a whole lot in resources. So, we all have those moments where things might get a little slow, and we do some general cleanup. So you can work these processes in. And then I would say, if you're really trying to sell it to management, do a small area or a department in your organization, just spend a few extra hours getting some things done, and show them what you've done with the pictures and with the talk about time saving, talk about a more safe work environment, cleanliness. It's not something that's going to add to the cost of their organization. It's going to be something that improves the bottom line. And then there was an added question there about some folks not wanting to throw anything away. And I certainly understand that. Remember a grandfather that lived in the Depression era, that he would pull a nail out of a board, that if the board was going to be burned, he would keep the nails and straighten them out and reuse them. And we certainly don't want to be wasteful in the organization. So the idea is that if there's items that we don't need in a certain work area, it's not that they necessarily have to be discarded if management doesn't want to discard them. The trick is really reallocating space and moving things around so that you can make the work area you have more efficient. Ideally, if it's something that adds no value to the organization, it would be sold or scrapped or something like that. But sometimes we just have to work with the resources the best way we can in the under the circle of control we have. And so I don't see any other questions. I hope everyone found this to be beneficial. If you have any questions, email address was on the slide pack intro, so feel free to shoot a question over any time. The next webinar that we have coming up is going to be on Wednesday, February 20th from 12 to 1 Central Time. The topic's going to be magnetic wedges, and it's going to be presented by Chuck Young. So that'll be a good one, especially for shops to inform wound stators. Survey and recording. So tomorrow at some point you should receive a link to the recording of the presentation, and that's going to be available for 30 days from today. This recording can also be found in the ESA resource library, at which point it can be purchased or downloaded. And again, send any follow-up questions you have, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.